When I started producing, I could not understand why all of my tracks sounded weak and muddy, while my favorite artist's music sounded clean and powerful. I knew that EQ is the tool to fix it, but I just didn't know when to use it, and more importantly, how to use it properly. Mastering EQ is the most powerful skill you can develop. It's how I helped my clients get their music to sound clean and professional. And once you understand it, your mixes will never sound amateur again. It all comes down to these 4 simple techniques. Each one builds on the last, and by the end of this video, you will feel confident using EQ to create radio quality mixes. But first, what is an EQ? So EQ is a tool that adds or removes frequencies from any given sound. Most EQs look something like this, with 20 Hz on the left, those are your low frequencies, and 20,000 Hz on the right, those are your high frequencies. Most EQs have a few different types of filters that can add or remove frequencies, like so. So we have a low cut, we have a high cut, a bell, or a shelf. Now, when I started producing, I would just throw an EQ on a sound on my track and randomly adjust few parameters. But I was making my music sound worse without even realizing it. And that leads me to the reason number 1 for using an EQ. If your track sounds muddy, it's probably because you have few instruments which are overlapping with each other. Let's look at the synth and bass in this track. If you look at the analyzer, you would see that the bass sits in the low frequencies, but the synth sits in the mid and high frequencies. But both instruments still overlap each other in those areas. So we can use an EQ to cut the low frequencies from the synth to create space for the bass. And we can do the same thing with the bass, carve out some of the high frequencies to create space for the synth. You will always have some instruments which you didn't realize that are overlapping each other. Look at the analyzer of these hats. Notice how much low frequencies they have. Now, even if you can't hear those frequencies, it's best to cut them out, because if you have too many elements similar to these, they will take a lot of space in the low end, where the bass usually sits. Just look at the peak of these sounds when I'm not filtering the low frequencies and when I am. We have a difference of about half a dB. It might not sound a lot, but it will help your track be louder and much more clear. So the reason number 1 for using an EQ is to create space between your instruments. But no matter how much space you have between your instruments, if the sounds themselves are muddy or harsh, your track will sound muddy and harsh too. And it comes down to knowing what to listen to when EQing a sound. And that leads me to the reason number 2 for using an EQ. So I want to show you a very simple way to find those problematic frequencies in your track. The more you use this method, the better you will get with detecting those frequencies with your ears. So let's go back to our synth. What you want to do is create a big bell like this, and then scan through the frequency spectrum until you hear something that doesn't sound right. Thinking in terms of muddy, boxy, or harsh really helps to visualize the problematic frequencies. This sounds really muddy, so let's make a little cut here and let's continue. You always want to be really careful with the frequencies around the 2.5 to 3K, because our ears are most sensitive to those frequencies. It's the same frequency where a baby is crying or a cat is meowing, and they do so because we are so sensitive to those frequencies. So reason number 2 for using an EQ is cleaning your sounds. But if you're not careful, there are a few situations where this technique will actually make your track sound flat and weak, which leads me to the third reason for using an EQ. So this lead sounded muddy around this frequency and around this frequency. So we made a cut with an EQ. But in another part of my melody, when different notes are playing, that same frequency makes this lead sound great. So you don't want to cut them out, right? Notice that in this part of the lead, different notes are playing, and it does sound muddier than the first part of this lead. So how will you clean that up without making the whole sound weaker? A great question indeed. And that is where we use dynamic EQ. By the way, would you like me to make more videos like this simplifying other production tools? Just say in the comments what exactly you want to see next. So let's get this back to 0 and this back to 0. We can use dynamic EQ by going to the outer ring. When it turns red, you can slide it down, like so. Let's do the same with this. We can change the threshold, so when these particular notes are not playing, this EQ will be disabled. Let's try to find the problematic frequencies in the second part of the lead. Let's make a cut there. And make a cut there. And you can see that the different notes are getting active depends on which notes are playing. So reason number 3 for using EQ is to clean dynamic sounds. But if you skip the next step, which is the most important of them all, your track isn't going to sound wide and spacious. When I found this technique, I thought to myself, what the hell? How did I not use this technique before? It's called mid-side EQ, and once you hear what it does, you will never EQ the same again. Let's start with this sound. First, let's drop a utility plugin on this channel and change this to mid-side mode so we can listen to the mids and sides. But you're probably asking, what the hell is mid and side? Imagine that you have 2 speakers or 2 ear cups. The mid is all the instruments which play exactly the same on both speakers, like the kick, the bass, the snare, and sometimes the vocal. They all feel like they play exactly in between the speakers. The side is all the instruments which play slightly different on each speaker, like a white synth, a pad, or anything that has reverb on it. So on almost every EQ, you have a mid-side mode. Let's start with EQ in the mid. Now we want to listen to the side. And you will notice that the side information is a bit different than the mid. And that's why it's important to have this utility plugin before the EQ. Let's toggle this to change the EQ to side. Notice that the cut here is much bigger than the mids. I actually went and EQ'd all the sounds in this track with a mid-side EQ so you can hear the difference before and after. So reason number 4 for using an EQ is to make your tracks feel wide and spacious. But if you feel stuck with loads of unfinished projects, learning to use an EQ alone isn't going to make any difference. So check out my community, Stuck to Finished. I help bedroom producers just like you produce high-quality music consistently, get hundreds of thousands of streams, play in clubs, and even earn money from the music. And by the way, if you want to see how I produced this track, watch the next video. I actually used only one Serum presets to make all the sounds in this track. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.